Hey, what is going on, party people? Greg Jenkins here from House Monkey Pot, and this is part 2 of 2 as we dig into the PlusThis Zoom webinar connector. In part 1, we set up a simple PlusThis feature to automatically add your Zoom webinar registrants to your Keap database and to tag them. And we went through the different settings in that integration that also allows you to tag attendees or people who register but then don't attend the webinar. Now, if you are using the Zoom registration page and the Zoom reminder emails, then that might give you everything that you need. You just share that URL anywhere you want. You can send it to your audience. You can post it on social and people can register for your webinar. And PlusThis will automatically sync those audiences and make sure that they are tagged accordingly inside Keap. However, if you find any part of the Zoom registration page or the Zoom reminder emails too rigid, if you're looking for more customization options or more flexibility, then this video is going to show you how I set up my own custom Keap campaign to invite my existing audience to register for the webinar with one click, and to build reminder emails that allows them to add the webinar event to their calendar directly from within Keap, within your Keap delivered email. So if that type of flexibility is what you are after, then you are in the right place. Let's take a look. Okay, so to start this, I'm going to just make a copy of a previous webinar campaign. I'm not going to build from scratch, but if you do want a breakdown of exactly why this campaign is built this way, how all of the pieces work, there is a video on the MonkeyPod YouTube channel with the webinar campaign breakdown. If you search there, you should be able to find a more detailed overview of how this all works. But I used this webinar or campaign structure for a previous webinar. So all we're going to do is just start by making a copy. And this is a great best practice, a time saver if you host events regularly and you want to repeat the same campaign structure rather than building from scratch. Making a copy is a great way to give yourself a running start into building out that automation. So we'll call this PlusThis showcase webinar, and then instead of retired, this is active, or it will be active as soon as we build and publish the campaign. Now, the first thing I do in the new campaign that is created is I update all of the tag goals with the exception of the invite group. I save that for last because that is how I launch people into this campaign. Let's go ahead and change this to PlusThis showcase, and we'll just swap that in anywhere I had the previous acronym. PlusThis showcase. PlusThis showcase, PlusThis showcase, PlusThis showcase. Okay. And then we can update the tags. So instead of the HDT registered, this would be the showcase registered. There we go. And I will do the same thing down here. And then this goal is going to be listening for whether they attended or missed. So there's two tags there. Remember, the PlusThis feature is tagging our attendees and it is tagging our registrants who did not make it to the event, the people who missed the live event. So either way, we're going to move those individuals on here. And then this is just a holding tank. So that's an empty sequence. I can mark that as ready so that once they attend or they miss out, once the event happens, they get moved into here. And that way, when I publish the recording, once I have that edited and hosted, those individuals will immediately flow into the recording. This sequence is just a holding tank as well. So historically, what I have done is I let Zoom send the initial confirmation email. So this sequence is sort of a placeholder while the Zoom confirmation email is sent out. And then they go into the countdown sequence, which has my own custom reminders leading up to the webinar. Up front, after the invite group is added, I have an immediate decision diamond just checking to see if they have unsubscribed from my webinar notifications previously. So The reason I do that is because I'm going to add some sizable groups. But if they have previously said, I don't want to know about your webinars, then I want to inherently or intuitively, intelligently rather, segment them out to make sure I'm not promoting something that they have told me they don't want. So all this does is pull them out, right? So it just branches them into the sequence and then removes them from the campaign so they're not getting reminders about a genre of communication that I have that they've previously told me that they don't want. Now, before we jump into edit those individual emails, let's open up our campaign links. This is where we have like a central bank of links that we will be using throughout the invite emails or throughout the reminder emails. So I have a one-click registration link. I have 2 places where the webinar recording might be hosted. And then I have 2 different links drawn from PlusThis that will allow people to add it to their calendar depending on whether they use a Google Calendar or Outlook or iCal calendar. So let's jump back over to PlusThis. In part 1 of this video, we set up the PlusThis feature. Once you click Save, you are presented with the instructions for how you can use the different components of this feature. So we'll come back to this HTTP post section. That's more of a failsafe, a fallback that we will use, but we don't need it just yet. Now, the one-click registration URL, right? In order to use this, you need to first put in the URL you want people to wind up at after they have registered. So if you are promoting this webinar to people on social media, you might just send them this link and then they can see the default Zoom registration page and thank you page. However, if you're sending it to people who are already on your list, you don't necessarily need them to fill in all their details because they're already in your database. So this is where the one-click registration URL becomes really valuable. And once they click that link, well, they need to see some sort of page telling them that it worked, right? Giving them an indication of success. So what I do is I just build a simple page on my own website, right, on my own domain, that I use for all of my webinars. So it is a generic confirmation page that just says, hey, we're registering you right now, thanks to PlusThis, and in a moment you'll have a confirmation email with your link. So we grab this URL, and then in PlusThis, when we add that to this field, it updates this this link, which is the one-click destination, right? So this is the magic link that PlusThis spits out, which allows us to let our email recipients register with a single click. So we just copy that URL and put it into the campaign links section, but we'll update that with the one-click link for this webinar, and we'll just click Save. And then we don't yet have the archive because this webinar hasn't yet taken place, so I can't update those links, but I can update the Google Calendar and iCal links also using the PlusThis settings. So here, right below the one-click registration link in PlusThis, it gives us a link for the ICS file, which is what Outlook and the iCal or the Apple Calendar use. So let's go ahead and copy that. And then it also gives you a Google link that you can use for the Google Calendar as well. So let's do the first one here, which is iCal. We'll erase what's in there and then add the new link and click Save. And then we will switch back to PlusThis, toggle this over to the Google Calendar version, select that, copy this one, and then jump back into Keap here and update the Google Calendar link. So it uses slightly different link formats for the 2 calendars because they need different file types in order to add that calendar icon. Now, again, if you are using the native reminder emails from Zoom, right? If you're using those native Zoom reminder emails, then this part isn't necessary. You won't need these 2 links because Zoom includes that by default. But the reason that these are so valuable is because I'm sending my own reminders as the event approaches. And so by adding those as campaign links, it lets me give people the file that will allow them to add this event to their calendar in a custom, unique fashion. So let's jump back up here and start building out our webinar invite sequence. Now, Of course, I want to update these. The webinar is actually next week. I'm building this out with less notice than I usually like to, but we still can dial this in to be going out maybe July 11th. So that's a 24-hour reminder of it. And then this will be the PlusThis showcase webinar invite. And this one's actually going to go out this afternoon. So I do want to update this to be today, and we'll choose at 3 p.m. or 3:15 p.m. And in this instance, I don't want it to use the contact's time zone because for anyone in Australia, this would have already passed, right? So I need this to be in my time zone to make sure that that initial invite goes out to everyone when I want it to later today. So I will update the actual email copy. I'm not going to make you watch me type these emails out. So we can, fast track that process. But the key here is making sure that my registration buttons are linking to that campaign link, right? So rather than going to a URL, we're linking to that campaign link, which is the one-click registration. So I will snap my fingers and we will update this one. And just like that, the email is updated. The subject line and preview text are both filled in. I've got some placeholder basic copy here. I may come back and revise this, but the point of this training isn't to have you guys watch me write copy. It's to show you the key process for connecting or allowing your audience to easily register using that one-click registration. So you can see I've got the link in here twice. And then just as a pro tip, I also have an opt-out here. I call this a soft unsubscribe. So rather than unsubscribing completely, which they can do, I also give people a link where they can opt out of my webinar-related promotions. And this is where the webinar's unsubscribe tag is applied. So this email is all set, ready to go. I haven't yet written the 24-hour reminder. Of course, I would do the same thing there and then mark this sequence as ready. And then speaking of that unsubscribe, right? So this tag goal is listening for either the opt-out globally or the soft unsubscribe. So I can just mark this as ready. And that way, if they unsubscribe during this process, they're removed from any redundant reminders or any additional follow-up there. Now, the tag or the link click goal is tracking whether they clicked that one-click registration. So in the emails in that sequence, right, the first email and then the 24-hour reminder, I want to make sure that I have the one-click registration button as well as the hyperlink selected. So that way, if they click the link to register, I know that PlusThis feature is running. But I also want to make sure that they are immediately removed so that they're not getting additional reminders. And then this is where I have the Failsafe process in place. So if you recall, in the PlusThis feature, in the implementation instructions, we had the HTTP post that you could use to create a registrant. So you shouldn't need this because the one-click registration URL should handle this automatically for us. But like I said, I use it as a failsafe. So if they click this link to register, this decision diamond checks, are they already registered, right? So if they don't have the PlusThis webinar or PlusThis showcase registered tag, right, then we send them into the failsafe. But if they click that link, like maybe they click it a second time, right? I want to make sure that this isn't running to try to re-register them for a webinar that they're already added to, right? So this decision diamond is just checking. If they are not yet registered, then they go into here. If they are registered, they go into here where it just sort of clears them out. So this is my fail-safe, just in case the one-click feature has a glitch or has an issue. I know that anyone who registers will end up in here. And then the key reminder here is that once the PlusThis feature runs, they will get the PlusThis showcase registered tag. That's this one here, which will stop either the invite sequence or the failsafe sequence, right? Anything upstream from that will be stopped once they register. Now, the next part of this process is to build out my countdown emails. So remember, I have this first sequence here that is just a 4-hour delay while Zoom sends the initial confirmation email, but I want to have a few custom reminders as that event approaches. So I can send this on the morning of the webinar, so that is July 12th here, and I'll do it a couple hours before the webinar. If the webinar is at 11 a.m., maybe I'll do it at 10:15 or at 9:15, right? And this one basically just says, hey, it's showtime. And then this is sort of a preview or a build-up for the event. So anyone who registers far in advance, right, a few days in advance, I want to give them a little more context and help them get excited about it. So what I'll do is I'll set up a date range here, July 9th or 10th at any time between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., right? And what this does is it sort of describes the event. It gives them the opportunity to add it to their calendar. It tells them about the panelists, etc. So I'll jump into this. This is where I would use the Google link, right? So the campaign link with the Google Calendar link from the PlusThis feature, as well as the iCal and the Outlook one. So I don't need a whole lot of detail here. You're already registered, smart move. You should have received a confirmation from Zoom. If you haven't, let's get the webinar on your calendar. And then I might give them some more detail about the people who will be presenting on this, or the nature of the content we'll be presenting. This is from the previous one, so maybe I would create an updated graphic. But at the very least, I would set the context and help them get excited. At this point, they're already registered for the event. And I want to make sure I update that subject line. So PlusThis showcase webinar is coming up. Your join link. And I can merge in the join link from PlusThis. Because PlusThis puts their Zoom join link into a custom field, I have the ability to just merge it into the email here. So like I said, they're already registered. So the whole function of this is to make sure that they have the information they need to successfully show up at the event at the time that it takes place. So I would build out that showtime email as well, and it would just be a last minute reminder with their join link. In fact, we can do that because I don't think there's a whole lot of content that needs to change here. It should just say, yeah, it's go time is what we trained for. Here's your link to join. The panel is ready to rock. That's still accurate. And we'll say, yeah, grab your popcorn. Here we go. So that email is live, or at least ready to be published. And that is just about the size of things. So the last change I would make, right, before we add the invite groups and actually launch them into this invite, is sort of an option. So if you plan to use the Zoom registration page, then you're basically done. That is, you can just send people to this URL. In fact, one thing I do is I keep a $12 a year domain that I own, monkeypodwebinar.com, and I just point it to the registration page. So if you see here on the website, right, it's currently steering people. If you go to monkeypodwebinar.com, it's going to take people to that Zoom registration page, right, which is this URL. So the reason I do that is so that if I need to verbally give people the URL, it's easier for them to remember monkeypodwebinar.com than it is to remember, zoom.us/webinar/register/ etc. Right? So that's a simple way that you can create a registration page. But if you don't want to use the Zoom registration page, maybe you want to build your own, maybe you want to add a registration page video or add some details that you can't easily do with the Zoom registration page, then we would build out a landing page right here that allows people to register. So this would be our PlusThis showcase registration, and I'll even spell it right. And then we would drop them from there into the Failsafe, right? So let them fill out this form, and then let the HTTP post automatically register them. So I will, again, snap my fingers, and we will build out this email here, or this landing page. There it is. So here we've got the headline. I've got a video here in the code snippet. And we've got a little bit of a description for the webinar, and then of course the form where they can fill out first name, last name, email. And I do have the panelists on the bottom, which I have not yet updated, but that's where the experts will go. And then I defined the redirect here. So on the submission of this form, they'll go to that same confirmation page, which is just an external URL. So this page is ready for me to publish. And again, I'm going to come back and make a few final changes to the actual copy here. But for the sake of this demo, we're good to go. So let's publish this. And then we can grab that URL. And of course, once we have the URL, that is where we would send people. Once they register, they're added to this Failsafe HTTP post sequence, which will register them for the webinar using that PlusThis feature. So if I'm going to steer traffic to this landing page, I just need to tell people to go to monkeypodwebinar.com. And as I mentioned previously, I would update the forwarding for this redirect to then point to that actual landing page. The things I haven't done yet are the actual replay. So this sequence here at the end, it needs the hosted location of that replay, and then the audience, the invite trigger. Those are the only two things that I'm leaving unpublished for now because I'm not quite ready to add people. But I will publish the other campaign artifacts here just to make sure everything is pretty much ready. And then once I do a final pass through of the copy and the test the registration process, I can actually launch this afternoon, and we'll see the initial invite go out to the groups that I add. So that's it. If you don't need the customized invite process or the customized registration page, then you probably were done a long time ago. But I wanted to unpack my full process here because I know that there is some frustration that can come along with the rigid nature of Zoom's emails or registration page. And so if you want to be able to create your own, I wanted you to see my process in case it simplifies things for you, or it highlights features in this PlusThis integration that you weren't aware of. Now, as with before, if you are already a PlusThis user, then you know how great it is, and hopefully this is one more tool that you can use in your business. But if you are not yet using PlusThis, I'd love to invite you to check it out, to start a free trial, and you can use my link, monkeypodmarketing.com/try PlusThis to get started. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. If you know anyone that this video can serve, feel free to share it with them. Otherwise, thanks for watching.